Everyone thinks they know how World War II started. September 1st, 1939. Hitler invades Poland. Britain and France declare war. Case closed, right? Wrong. The real story begins 2 decades earlier, and it's far more disturbing than what you learned in school. Act 1. The lie we've been told. 020. We've been taught that World War II was Hitler's war. A madman seizes power. Germany goes rogue, and the world has no choice but to fight back. It's a clean narrative. Good versus evil. But history is never that simple. The truth? World War II didn't start in 1939. It started in 1919 in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, and the people who lit the fuse weren't wearing swastikas. Act 2. Versailles, the original sin. 1 minute. Picture this. June 28, 1919. The Treaty of Versailles is signed. Germany is forced to accept total blame for World War I. They're hit with impossible reparations, 132 billion gold marks. That's roughly $442 billion in today's money. But here's what historians gloss over. The treaty wasn't about justice. It was about revenge. French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau openly admitted he wanted to squeeze Germany until the pips squeak. British economist John Maynard Keynes, who was actually there, resigned in protest. He predicted the treaty would lead to economic chaos and another war within 20 years. He was off by 77 days. By 1923, hyperinflation had destroyed the German economy. A loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Life savings became worthless overnight. The middle class was annihilated. People were burning money for heat because it was cheaper than buying coal. This wasn't just bad luck. The Allied powers knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted Germany weak, humiliated, unable to ever threaten them again. But they miscalculated catastrophically. When you destroy a nation's economy, you don't create peace. You create desperation. And desperate people don't want democracy. They want someone strong enough to fix the nightmare. Here's what your textbooks won't tell you. Hitler didn't seize power. He was handed power by a terrified establishment that thought they could control him. Act 4. The Power Vacuum. January 30th, 1933. Conservative politicians, convinced they could use Hitler as their puppet, appoint him chancellor. Former Chancellor Franz von Papen literally said, "We've hired him." They thought they were clever. They were signing their own death warrant. Add line. But Hitler wasn't the disease, he was the symptom. The real question isn't how did Hitler rise to power? It's why were millions of ordinary Germans willing to follow him? Act 5. The International Conspiracy of Silence, 445. And here's where it gets really dark. The Western powers didn't just create the conditions for Hitler's rise. They enabled it, every step of the way. 1933. Hitler withdraws from the League of Nations. No consequences. 1935. Germany openly begins rearming, violating Versailles. Britain signs a naval agreement legitimizing it. 1936. Hitler remilitarizes the Rhineland. France and Britain do nothing. 1938. The Anschluss. Germany annexes Austria. The world shrugs. September 1938. Munich Agreement. Britain and France literally hand Czechoslovakia to Hitler, hoping it'll satisfy him. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returns to London, waving a piece of paper, declaring peace for our time. Less than a year later, tanks are rolling through Warsaw. But it gets worse. Much worse. While publicly condemning Nazi Germany, Western corporations were funding it. Ford, General Motors, IBM, Standard Oil, all doing business with the Reich. IBM's punch card technology literally helped organize the Holocaust. American banks refinanced German debt. The Bank of England helped Germany launder gold stolen from conquered nations, gold pulled from the teeth of concentration camp victims. Stalin and Hitler signed a non-aggression pact and carved up Poland together. But everyone forgets that Britain and France had also tried to negotiate with Hitler, willing to sacrifice Eastern Europe to avoid war. Act 7. What historians won't say. 7:30. Here's the uncomfortable truth. World War II wasn't caused by one evil man. It was caused by a system of powers that punished Germany so severely after World War I that fascism became inevitable. then stood by and watched as the monster they created grew stronger. The Treaty of Versailles guaranteed another war. The Great Depression accelerated the timeline, and the policy of appeasement gave Hitler every reason to believe the democracies were too weak and too cowardly to stop him. He was almost right. So why Poland? Why did Britain and France finally draw the line in 1939? Here's what's rarely mentioned. It wasn't about Poland. Britain and France had already sacrificed Czechoslovakia, an actual democracy with fortified borders and a real army. Poland was a military dictatorship with outdated equipment. The real reason? By September 1939, even the most naive politicians realized appeasement had failed. Hitler had broken every promise. If they backed down again, their own populations would lose all faith in them. But here's the twisted part. Britain and France declared war to defend Poland, then did almost nothing to actually help. The phony war lasted 8 months, while Poland was destroyed. And let's talk about the player everyone wants to forget, Stalin. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact wasn't just a non-aggression treaty. It was a division of Eastern Europe between two totalitarian powers. While Hitler invaded Poland from the west, Soviet forces invaded from the east. Stalin got half of Poland, the Baltic states, and parts of Finland and Romania. Hitler got a free hand to focus on Western Europe without worrying about a two-front war. For nearly 2 years, Stalin and Hitler were effectively allies. Soviet resources fueled the Nazi war machine. Soviet grain fed German soldiers. Soviet oil powered German tanks. The Nazis and Soviets even held joint military parades in conquered Polish cities. So what's the real origin of World War II? It's not a story about one country or one dictator. It's a story about what happens when victors in war prioritize revenge over reconciliation. Economic devastation pushes populations toward extremism. Democracies appease aggressors instead of confronting them early. Corporate profits trump moral responsibility. World powers play cynical games with smaller nations as pawns. World War II was the inevitable result of World War I's catastrophic peace. The war that was supposed to end all wars guaranteed the deadliest conflict in human history. Act 11. Why this matters today. 12 hours. You might be thinking, why does this matter now? That was 80 years ago. Because we're making the same mistakes. Economic instability breeding extremism. Check. Authoritarian leaders testing whether democracies will respond. Check. Powers dividing spheres of influence while ignoring smaller nations' sovereignty. Check. Corporations prioritizing profits over ethics in dealing with authoritarian regimes. Check. The patterns that led to World War II didn't disappear. We just stopped learning the real lessons. The origin of World War II isn't what your history teacher told you. It's not a simple story of good versus evil, democracy versus tyranny. It's a story about how peace treaties can plant the seeds of war. How economic weapons can be as devastating as military ones. How appeasing aggression doesn't prevent conflict, it guarantees it. The world didn't stumble into World War II, it was built, brick by decisions made in Paris, London, Moscow, and Washington, as much as in Berlin. 70 million people died because the victors of one war couldn't imagine a peace that wasn't built on humiliation and revenge. The question isn't just what historians get wrong about World War II. It's whether we've learned anything at all.